The blood-red sun dipped below the jagged horizon as Gideon Morgan dismounted from his weary stallion, the golden light casting long shadows across the dusty main street of Eureka, Nevada. The year was 1878, and like the setting sun, Gideon's hopes had been steadily sinking since he'd ridden into this mining town 3 days prior with nothing but a handful of dollars, his father's revolver, and the crushing weight of his past mistakes. "Another day, another disappointment," he muttered, tethering his horse outside the town's only saloon. The miner's fortune had become his nightly refuge, a place to drown his sorrows in cheap whiskey while he figured out his next move. At 32, Gideon was no stranger to hard living. The Civil War had taken his youth, cattle rustling had nearly taken his life, and an honest try at ranching had taken what little savings he'd managed to scrape together. The saloon's familiar symphony of tinny piano music, drunken laughter, and clinking glasses greeted him as he pushed through the swinging doors. He nodded at the barkeep and settled into his usual corner spot, back to the wall, eyes on the door, old habits from dangerous years. "Whiskey," he said when the barkeep approached. "Leave the bottle." "Rough day hunting that job, cowboy." The barkeep, a portly man with a walrus mustache, placed a smudged glass and a half-full bottle before him. "There's nothing out there for a man with my particular history," Gideon replied, pouring himself a generous portion. "Seems my reputation's ridden ahead of me." "Well, you might be in luck tonight," the barkeep leaned in conspiratorially. "Mrs. Fletcher's been asking around for hired help with her ranch. Husband passed last winter, left her with a spread too big for one person to manage and a little girl to raise besides." Gideon snorted. "A widow and a child? I'm no good with either. $5 a week plus room and board. Decent work for a man down on his luck." Gideon stared into his glass, watching the amber liquid catch the lamplight. $5 a week wouldn't make him rich, but it would keep him fed and give him time to figure out something better. The ranch was probably falling apart if she was desperate enough to hire whatever drifter came along. "Where's this ranch?" he asked finally. "About 10 miles north, following Silver Creek. Can't miss it, the Fletcher place." The barkeep moved away to serve another customer, leaving Gideon alone with his thoughts and his whiskey. By the time he'd drained half the bottle, Gideon had convinced himself that a temporary job was better than no job at all. He'd avoid the widow as much as possible, steer clear of the child, do his work, collect his pay, and move on when something better came along. Simple as that. The next morning, nursing a mild headache and a mouth that tasted like sawdust, Gideon rode north along Silver Creek. The landscape opened up as he left town, revealing rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and the occasional pine. The creek gurgled alongside the trail, its clear waters flashing in the morning sun. After nearly 2 hours of riding, he spotted a modest 2-story farmhouse nestled in a small valley. A weathered barn stood nearby, along with a corral containing a few horses. Fields stretched beyond, some planted, others lying fallow. It wasn't the largest spread he'd seen, but it was substantial for one woman to manage alone. As he approached, he noticed a slender figure hanging laundry on a line. Her back was to him, a faded blue dress hugging her frame, honey blonde hair escaping from a loose bun. A little girl, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, sat nearby on a wooden stump, singing to herself as she played with a rag doll. The woman turned at the sound of his horse, her hand shading her eyes against the sun. Even from a distance, Gideon could see she was younger than he'd expected, probably in her mid-20s. Her face was sun-kissed and pretty in a simple way, with high cheekbones and a determined set to her jaw. "Hello there," she called, her voice clear and steady. "Can I help you?" Gideon dismounted, suddenly aware of his unshaven face and dust-coated clothes. "Madam," he said, removing his hat, "name's Gideon Morgan. Heard in town you might be looking for hired help." The woman approached, wiping her hands on her apron. Up close, her eyes were startling, a deep, clear green that reminded him of forest pools. She studied him with unabashed directness. "I'm Emma Fletcher," she said, "and yes, I am looking for help." Her gaze swept over him, assessing. "Have you worked ranch land before, Mr. Morgan?" "I have, madam. Grew up on a cattle ranch in Texas. Worked as a ranch hand in Colorado for a spell." He kept his voice even, leaving out the less savory parts of his history. "And what brings you to Eureka?" "Just passing through, looking for work." She nodded slowly. "Well, Mr. Morgan, I won't pretend this is an easy job. My husband Thomas passed last winter pneumonia. Left me with 200 acres, 30 head of cattle, some crops, and Lily here." She gestured toward the little girl, who was now watching them with curious blue eyes. "I can manage the house and the garden, but the cattle and the fields." She trailed off, her expression momentarily vulnerable before hardening again. "I understand, madam. The pay is $5 a week, plus meals and lodging in the bunkhouse. It's just you, I can't afford more than one hand right now." Gideon glanced around at the property. There was work here, sure enough. The fence line needed mending, the barn roof had missing shingles, and the fields would need tending, but it was honest work, and he'd done worse for less. "I'll take it," he said. Relief briefly softened Emma's features. "Good, you can start today." She hesitated, then added, "I should warn you, Mr. Morgan, Lily will likely follow you around asking questions. She's curious about everything." As if on cue, the little girl stood up and approached, clutching her doll to her chest. She had her mother's blonde hair but wore it in 2 braids tied with faded ribbons. Her eyes, round and inquisitive, fixed on Gideon. "Are you going to help my mama?" she asked without preamble. Gideon shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, I am. My papa went to heaven. Do you know how to fix the chicken coop? Papa always fixed the chicken coop." "Lily," Emma said gently, "Mr. Morgan just arrived. Let's give him time to settle in." She turned to Gideon. "I'll show you to the bunkhouse. You can leave your horse in the corral for now." As they walked, Emma outlined his duties: tending the cattle, repairing fences, maintaining the outbuildings, helping with planting and harvesting. Gideon listened silently, already cataloging the work that needed to be done. The bunkhouse was small but clean, with 4 bunks, though he'd be the only occupant. A washstand, a small wood stove, and a table with 2 chairs completed the furnishings. "It's not much," Emma said, "but it's dry and warm." "It'll do fine, madam. Dinner's at 6 in the main house." She hesitated at the door. "Mr. Morgan, I don't know your story and I don't need to. I just need someone who'll work hard and deal fairly with me. Can you do that?" Gideon met her steady gaze. "Yes, madam, I can. Then we'll get along just fine." She left him to settle in, her footsteps fading as she walked back toward the house. Gideon sat heavily on one of the bunks, dropping his saddlebags beside him. He'd worked for women before, but never a young widow with a child. He wasn't good with women. His failed attempts at courting had taught him that, and he was certainly no good with children. He'd just have to keep his distance, do his job, and avoid complications. Later that evening, after spending the afternoon assessing the property and beginning repairs on the chicken coop, Gideon washed up and headed to the main house for dinner. He knocked tentatively on the back door, hat in hand. Emma opened it, the warm light from inside silhouetting her. She'd changed into a simpler dress, her hair now neatly pinned back. The smell of cooking food wafted past her stew, fresh bread, something sweet. "Come in, Mr. Morgan," she said, stepping aside. "Hope you're hungry." The kitchen was warm and homey, with worn but clean furniture and simple curtains. A large pot bubbled on the stove, and a loaf of bread cooled on the counter. Lily sat at the table, swinging her legs and arranging cutlery with great concentration. "Mr. Morgan is joining us for dinner, Lily," Emma said, moving to stir the pot. "I put out a spoon and a fork and a knife for you," Lily announced proudly. "And a napkin, too." "Thank you," Gideon said awkwardly, sitting where she indicated. He felt oversized and out of place in the cozy kitchen, like a bull in a china shop. Emma served the stew, a hearty mix of beef, potatoes, and vegetables, along with thick slices of bread still warm from the oven. For a few minutes they ate in silence, Gideon trying not to wolf down the best meal he'd had in months. "Do you like it?" Lily asked suddenly. "Mama makes the best stew, Papa always said so." "It's very good," Gideon replied, glancing at Emma. "Thank you," Emma said. "It's nothing fancy, but it fills the belly." She hesitated, then asked, "Did you get a chance to look around the property this afternoon?" "I did. Started fixing that chicken coop. Tomorrow I'll check the south fence line, saw some posts that need replacing. Then I'll take a look at the cattle." Emma nodded. "I appreciate it. Things have been difficult since Thomas passed. I've been trying to keep up, but there's only so much one person can do." "You've done well, madam," Gideon said honestly. "Place could be in much worse shape." A small smile touched her lips. "Thank you for saying so, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Morgan, do you have a horse?" Lily piped up. "I do, a gelding named Buck. I have a pony. His name is Sugar. Papa got him for me before he went to heaven. Can you ride horses fast? Papa used to ride really fast." "Lily," Emma said, "let Mr. Morgan eat." "It's all right," Gideon said, surprising himself. "Yes, I can ride fast when I need to." "Can you teach me to ride fast?" Gideon glanced at Emma, who was watching the exchange with an unreadable expression. "That would be up to your mother." "We'll see," Emma said diplomatically. "Now finish your stew, Lily. It's almost bedtime." The rest of the meal passed with occasional questions from Lily and brief answers from Gideon. He helped clear the table when they were done, despite Emma's protests. "You don't have to do that, Mr. Morgan. My mother would tan my hide if I didn't help after a meal like that, madam." She smiled at that, a genuine smile that reached her eyes and transformed her face. For a moment, Gideon forgot what he was doing, caught by the sudden brightness of her expression. "Well, we wouldn't want that," she said. "Thank you." After helping with the dishes, Gideon excused himself and returned to the bunkhouse. The night was clear and cool, stars pricking the vast Nevada sky. He sat on the small porch, rolling a cigarette and thinking about the day. Emma Fletcher was nothing like he'd expected. She was young, yes, but there was a strength in her that he admired, a quiet determination to hold onto her home and provide for her daughter. And the little girl, Lily, with her endless questions and solemn blue eyes. Well, he'd just have to get used to her curiosity. It was temporary, he reminded himself, just until something better came along. But as he smoked and watched the stars, Gideon couldn't deny that a hot meal and a real bed felt mighty good after months of drifting. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Gideon rose at dawn, took care of his own horse and the other animals, then spent his days mending fences, repairing outbuildings, and tending to the cattle. Emma worked in the house and garden, preserving food for the coming winter and keeping up with the endless tasks of running a household. Lily divided her time between helping her mother with simple chores and following Gideon around, peppering him with questions about everything from how fence posts stayed in the ground to why the sky was blue. At first, Gideon tried to keep his distance from the child, answering her questions with the briefest possible responses. But Lily was persistent, her genuine curiosity slowly wearing down his defenses. He found himself explaining how to tell a horse's age by its teeth, showing her how to properly coil a rope, and even lifting her up to see a robin's nest in the barn rafters. Emma watched these interactions with a mixture of amusement and caution. One evening, as they sat on the porch after Lily had gone to bed, she broached the subject. "You're good with her," she said, her hands busy with mending. "Better than you think you are." Gideon shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I'm no good with girls, madam, just answering her questions is all." Emma's hands stilled and she looked up at him with those clear green eyes. "Then let me raise her gentle, Mr. Morgan, and you just keep being kind to her. That's all she needs." The simple statement caught him off guard. "I'm not planning to stay long enough to matter much to her life, Mrs. Fletcher?" "Everyone who touches a child's life matters, Mr. Morgan, even the ones who are just passing through." She resumed her sewing, effectively ending the conversation. That night, Gideon lay awake longer than usual, thinking about Emma's words. He'd always avoided getting close to people, knowing he'd eventually move on. It was easier that way for everyone. But Emma's quiet assertion troubled him, making him question patterns he'd followed for years. As May turned to June, the weather warmed and the fields flourished under Gideon's care. The cattle grew fatter on the summer grass, and the repairs around the property began to catch up with the needs. Emma noticed the changes, both in her ranch and in the man who worked it. Gideon was still quiet, still kept to himself, but he'd softened around the edges. He no longer tensed when Lily approached, and sometimes Emma caught him smiling at the little girl's antics. He took his meals with them regularly now, occasionally contributing to the conversation with dry observations that made Emma laugh. One sunny afternoon, Emma was hanging laundry when she heard Lily's delighted squeal. Looking up, she saw Gideon leading the little girl's pony around the corral, Lily perched proudly on its back. He was showing her how to hold the reins properly, his large hands gently adjusting her small ones, his voice low and patient as he explained. Something shifted in Emma's chest at the sight, a warmth spreading through her that she hadn't felt since Thomas died. She quickly turned back to her laundry, confused by the sudden emotion. That evening, when Lily had gone to bed full of excited chatter about her riding lesson, Emma found Gideon on the porch, whittling a small piece of wood. "Thank you for teaching her today," she said, settling into the chair beside him. "She's been talking about nothing else." "She's a quick learner," Gideon replied, his knife making smooth, careful strokes. "Fearless, too, like her father," Emma smiled sadly. "Thomas would break horses that other men wouldn't touch, said he could feel what they were thinking." "He sounds like a good man." "He was." Emma looked out at the darkening land. "We had our share of hardships, but he never complained, just put his head down and worked harder." She glanced at Gideon. "You remind me of him sometimes." Gideon's hands stilled. "I doubt that very much, madam." "Why?" He hesitated, then set the carving aside. "Your husband sounds like he was an honest, hard-working man who built something worth having. I've made different choices in my life." Emma studied him in the fading light. "The past is the past, Mr. Morgan. It's what you do now that matters. Some pasts don't stay buried, Mrs. Fletcher." "Is that why you keep moving on? You're running from something?" Gideon didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was low. "Sometimes it's running from, sometimes it's running to. Mostly it's just running." Emma nodded slowly. "Well, you don't have to run while you're here. Whatever's in your past, it doesn't change the good work you're doing now." Before Gideon could respond, they heard a small sound from the doorway. Lily stood there in her nightgown, clutching her doll. "I had a bad dream," she said, her lower lip trembling. Emma rose immediately. "Oh, sweetheart, come here." She gathered Lily into her arms. "Let's get you back to bed. I'll stay with you until you fall asleep." As she carried Lily inside, she glanced back at Gideon. "Good night, Mr. Morgan. Good night, Mrs. Fletcher. Good night, Lily." The little girl peered over her mother's shoulder. "Will you still teach me to ride tomorrow, if your mother says it's all right?" "It is," Emma said softly. Gideon nodded, watching as they disappeared into the house. He sat for a long while afterward, his whittling forgotten, thinking about roots and running and the strange comfort of this place. The following days brought increasing temperatures and the first signs of a potential drought. The creek level dropped and the grass began to yellow in spots. Gideon worked harder, ensuring the cattle had access to water and checking the well daily. Emma watched the sky anxiously, hoping for rain clouds that never materialized. "We need rain soon," she said one evening as they sat at the kitchen table, going over the list of supplies they needed from town. "The north pasture is already showing signs of stress." "I've been thinking about that," Gideon said. "There's a spring on the other side of the ridge. If we dug a channel, we could divert some of that water to the north field." "Is that possible?" "It would be work, but yes, I've seen it done on other ranches." Emma considered this. "How long would it take?" "A week, maybe more, working alone. Less if I had help." "I can help," she offered. "Lily can stay with Mrs. Johnson in town during the days. She's been wanting Lily to visit anyway." Gideon looked surprised. "It's hard work, madam." Emma's chin lifted slightly. I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Morgan. This is my ranch and I'll do whatever it takes to save it. The determination in her eyes reminded him of why he'd come to respect her so much over the past weeks. She wasn't just surviving, she was fighting for her home and her daughter's future. All right, he agreed. We'll start next week. They rode into town the following day to purchase supplies and arrange for Lily to stay with the Johnsons. Eureka had grown since Gideon had first arrived, with new mining claims bringing in fresh faces and money. The main street bustled with activity miners coming off shift, shopkeepers hawking wares, ladies in fashionable dresses promenading along the wooden sidewalks. Gideon noticed the way some of the townspeople looked at Emma with a mixture of sympathy and speculation. A young, attractive widow was bound to draw attention, especially one as independent as Emma Fletcher. He found himself unconsciously moving closer to her as they navigated the crowded street. At the general store, they were greeted warmly by the proprietor, Mr. Daniels, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose. "Mrs. Fletcher, good to see you. And little Miss Lily, how you've grown." "Hello, Mr. Daniels," Emma replied with a smile. "We need quite a few things today." As Emma handed over her list, Lily tugged at Gideon's sleeve. "Can I have a candy stick, Mr. Morgan, please?" Before Gideon could answer, a deep voice interrupted. "Well, well, if it isn't Gideon Morgan." Gideon turned slowly, his body tensing. A tall man with a silver-streaked beard and cold blue eyes stood in the doorway, his hand resting casually near the pistol at his hip. "Marshal Blackburn," Gideon acknowledged, keeping his voice even. "Didn't know you were in these parts. Been the marshal here going on 2 years now." Blackburn's gaze shifted to Emma and Lily, then back to Gideon. "Interesting company you're keeping these days." Emma stepped forward. "Marshal, I'm Emma Fletcher. This is my daughter, Lily. Mr. Morgan works for me." Blackburn tipped his hat to her. "Madam." "Just surprised to see an old acquaintance is all." His eyes hardened as they returned to Gideon, especially one with such a colorful history. The store had gone quiet, other customers watching the exchange with interest. Gideon could feel Emma's questioning gaze but kept his focus on Blackburn. "That's all in the past, Marshal, is it?" Blackburn smiled thinly. "Folks don't change their nature in my experience." He turned to Emma. "Mrs. Fletcher, I'd be careful about the men you hire. Some have reputations that could reflect poorly on a respectable lady." Emma's back straightened. "I judge people by their actions toward me and mine, Marshal. Mr. Morgan has been nothing but hardworking and honorable since I hired him." Blackburn raised an eyebrow. "As you say, madam, just offering some friendly advice." He touched his hat again. "Good day to you all." With a final warning look at Gideon, he left the store. The atmosphere remained tense for several moments. Mr. Daniels cleared his throat nervously and began gathering the items on Emma's list. Lily, sensing the unease but not understanding its cause, pressed closer to her mother. "Mr. Morgan," Emma said quietly, "would you mind taking Lily to look at the penny candy while I finish here?" Gideon nodded, relieved for the excuse to step away. He led Lily to the candy display, aware of the curious glances following them. "What kind do you like?" He asked the little girl, trying to sound normal. "Peppermint," she said, her earlier excitement dimmed by the strange encounter. "Mr. Morgan, why was that man angry at you?" "He's not angry exactly," Gideon said, selecting a peppermint stick. "We just knew each other a long time ago." "Did you do something bad?" Gideon hesitated, then crouched down to her level. "Everyone makes mistakes, Lily. The important thing is to learn from them and try to do better." She considered this seriously, then nodded. "That's what Mama says too." They rejoined Emma, who had finished her transaction. The ride back to the ranch was quieter than usual, Lily's chatter subdued by the tension she sensed between the adults. When they arrived home, Emma sent her to feed the chickens while she and Gideon unloaded the supplies. "I think you owe me an explanation, Mr. Morgan," Emma said when they were alone in the barn. Gideon sighed heavily. "Yes, I suppose I do." He set down the sack of flour he was carrying. "Marshal Blackburn and I crossed paths in Colorado about 5 years ago. I was Running with a rough crowd then, cattle rustlers. Emma's expression remained neutral. Go on. We hit a ranch where Blackburn was working as a deputy. There was a gunfight. A man died, one of Blackburn's friends. I wasn't the one who shot him, but I was there. Gideon met her gaze steadily. I served 2 years in territorial prison. When I got out, I tried to go straight, worked honest jobs, stayed out of trouble, but a reputation follows a man. Is that why you keep moving on? Because people find out about your past, partly, and partly because I've never found a reason to stay. He watched her carefully. I'll understand if you want me to leave, Mrs. Fletcher. Emma was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Did you tell me the truth about everything else? Your skills, your experience working ranches? Yes, madam, all of that was true. And have you given me any reason, in all the weeks you've been here, to question your character or your work? I don't believe so. Then I don't see why your past should matter more than your present. She picked up a sack of beans. We still have work to do, Mr. Morgan. The irrigation channel won't dig itself. Gideon stared at her retreating back, amazed by her matter-of-fact acceptance. He'd expected anger, disgust, immediate dismissal, not this calm acknowledgement of his confession followed by practical consideration of the work ahead. It was the first time someone had looked at his past and then deliberately chosen to see beyond it. The next morning, they took Lily to town to stay with the Johnsons for the week. The little girl was excited about the visit, but clung to both Emma and Gideon before they left. "You'll come get me soon?" she asked, her small hands clutching Gideon's larger one. "Before you know it," he promised. "And when we come back, we'll have more riding lessons." She beamed at that, allowing Mrs. Johnson, a plump, motherly woman, to lead her inside with promises of cookies and stories. The work on the irrigation channel was every bit as hard as Gideon had warned. They started at dawn each day, digging through rocky soil and clearing brush. Emma worked alongside him, her face streaked with dirt, her hands developing calluses, but never complaining. By the third day, they had made significant progress, the channel taking shape as they followed the natural contours of the land. They spoke little while they worked, saving their energy for the task at hand. But in the evenings, as they sat on the porch recovering from the day's exertions, their conversations deepened. Emma told Gideon about growing up in Ohio, coming west with her parents as a teenager, meeting Thomas at a harvest dance when she was 18. Gideon, in turn, shared stories of his childhood in Texas, his service in the Confederate Army despite his family's mixed feelings about the cause, and his aimless wandering after the war. "I never meant to become an outlaw," he admitted one night, the confession easier in the darkness. "It just seemed like every honest path was closed to me after the war. The rustling started small, just a cow here and there when we were hungry. Then it became a way of life. And now," Emma asked softly, "now I'm tired of running, tired of having nothing to show for my years." He looked out at the land they'd been working, visible in the moonlight. "What you're doing here, building something, making a home that's worth something. It's harder than I ever imagined," Emma said. "When Thomas was alive, we shared the burden. Now," she sighed. "Some days I wonder if I should sell the place, take Lily back east to my sister." "Is that what you want?" "No," she said firmly. "This is our home. Thomas and I built it together. Lily was born in that house. I want her to grow up here, knowing the life her father loved." She glanced at Gideon. "But I'm not foolish enough to think I can do it entirely alone." The implication hung in the air between them, neither acknowledging it directly but both aware of its weight. By the end of the week, the channel was complete. They tested it by damming part of the spring, watching with satisfaction as water began flowing down their newly created pathway toward the north pasture. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it would help sustain the field through the dry summer months. They rode into town to collect Lily, both of them exhausted but pleased with their accomplishment. The little girl threw herself at them when they arrived, babbling excitedly about her week with the Johnsons but clearly happy to be going home. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Johnson pulled Emma aside while Gideon helped Lily onto the wagon. "People are talking, Emma," the older woman said quietly, "about you and Mr. Morgan alone at the ranch together." Emma's cheeks flushed. "There's nothing improper happening, Martha. He's my employee." "I know that, dear, but you know how people can be, and with his reputation." Mrs. Johnson shook her head. "Just be careful. A widow with a child can't afford scandal." "Thank you for your concern," Emma said stiffly, "but Mr. Morgan has been nothing but respectful and hardworking." "I won't dismiss a good man because of gossip." The ride home was lively with Lily's chatter, but Emma remained distracted, thinking about Mrs. Johnson's warning. She'd been so focused on saving her ranch that she hadn't considered how her arrangement with Gideon might appear to others. Not that anything inappropriate had occurred, their relationship had remained strictly professional, despite the growing ease between them. But she couldn't deny the warmth she felt in his presence, the way she found herself looking forward to their evening conversations, the unexpected flutter in her stomach when their hands occasionally brushed while working. It had been so long since she'd felt anything beyond grief and determination that these new emotions were both confusing and unsettling. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Emma found Gideon in the barn, brushing down his horse. She hesitated in the doorway, watching him for a moment. His movements were gentle but efficient, his large hands surprisingly delicate as they worked the brush through the horse's coat. He spoke softly to the animal, words she couldn't quite make out but whose tone conveyed affection. "Mr. Morgan," she said, stepping into the lantern light. He turned, surprised. "Mrs. Fletcher, is everything all right?" "Yes, She gathered her courage. "I wanted to thank you for your work on the irrigation channel. It was beyond what I could have expected." "Just doing my job, madam." "No, it was more than that." She moved closer. "You've done more for this ranch in a few weeks than I could have managed in months." Gideon set the brush aside, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "It's a good place, worth the effort." "Mrs. Johnson mentioned that there's been talk in town about us." His body tensed visibly. "What kind of talk?" "The kind that happens when a widow lives alone with a male employee." She forced a smile. "Nothing we need to concern ourselves with. People will always talk," Gideon said carefully. "But if it's causing problems for you, I can move on, find work elsewhere." "Is that what you want, to move on?" He was quiet for a long moment. "No," he finally admitted, "it's not." The simple honesty of his answer caught Emma by surprise. "I don't want that either," she said softly. They stood looking at each other, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Gideon took a step toward her, then stopped, uncertainty clear in his face. "Emma," he said, her given name sounding like a caress in his deep voice. "I'm not the kind of man you should want in your life. I've got nothing to offer you or Lily except trouble." "That's not true," she countered. "You've offered us help when we needed it most. Kindness, protection." She took a deep breath. "And maybe something more if you wanted to stay." Before he could respond, a frantic barking erupted outside the barn, followed by the sound of horses approaching at speed. Gideon moved immediately, positioning himself between Emma and the barn door, his hand going to the gun at his hip. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice hard. But Emma followed as he stepped outside, her heart racing. 3 riders had entered the yard, their horses lathered and breathing hard. In the moonlight, she could make out Marshal Blackburn among them. "Morgan," Blackburn called, dismounting smoothly despite his age. "Should have known I'd find you here." "What do you want, Marshal?" Gideon's voice was calm, but Emma could sense the tension in his body. "Got a telegram today. Seems you're wanted in Wyoming territory for bank robbery and murder." Emma gasped. "That can't be right." "Wire came through clear as day, madam." Blackburn's eyes never left Gideon. "James Holden and Gideon Morgan, wanted for the robbery of the First Bank of Cheyenne and the murder of a teller named Franklin Peters." "When was this supposed to have happened?" Gideon demanded. 3 months ago. March 18th. Emma saw Gideon's shoulders relax slightly. "I was already here in Nevada by then, working at the Golden Ace mine until I came to work for Mrs. Fletcher in early April." Blackburn's eyes narrowed. You got anyone who can verify that? The foreman at the mine, Walter Simmons, and Mrs. Fletcher can confirm when I started here. It's true, Emma said quickly. He's been working for me since April 10th. He couldn't possibly have been in Wyoming in March. Blackburn looked skeptical. Pretty convenient alibi. It's the truth, Gideon said flatly. Check with Simmons if you don't believe me. The standoff continued for several tense moments before Blackburn finally nodded curtly. I'll do that. But in the meantime, you stay put, Morgan. Don't get any ideas about running. I'm not running anywhere, Gideon replied, his gaze briefly meeting Emma's. I've got work to do here. After the lawman departed, Emma and Gideon returned to the barn in silence. The moment that had been building between them before the interruption had dissolved, replaced by a heavy uncertainty. You weren't in Wyoming, Emma said finally. You couldn't have done what they're saying. No, I couldn't have. Gideon leaned against a post, suddenly looking tired. But someone's using my name, probably Holden. We rode together years ago. He glanced at her. This is what I meant, Emma. Trouble follows me whether I'm looking for it or not. Blackburn will check your alibi. He'll find out you're telling the truth. And then what? There'll be something else someday, someone else from my past, some other crime I'm accused of. He shook his head. You and Lily deserve better than a life with that kind of shadow hanging over it. Emma stepped closer, determination flaring. I think I can decide for myself what we deserve, and I'm not afraid of shadows, Gideon. I've been living with them since Thomas died. She reached out, hesitantly touching his arm. Stay, help me fight this. Show Blackburn and everyone else in this town that you're not the man they think you are. His hand covered hers, warm and calloused. You're an extraordinary woman, Emma Fletcher. Is that a yes? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It's a God help me, I can't seem to say no to you. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Walter Simmons, the mine foreman, a burly man with a bushy mustache who looked uncomfortable on Emma's front porch. Marshal Blackburn came asking about Morgan, he explained after Emma had invited him in for coffee. Wanted to know if he really worked for me in March. And, Emma prompted, her heart beating faster, told him the truth. Morgan was on my crew from February 10th to April 5th, worked every shift, never missed a day. Simmons sipped his coffee. Not the friendliest fellow, your Morgan, but honest work is what I got from him. Relief washed over Emma. Thank you for telling the marshal that, Simmons nodded. Figured I'd come let you know myself. Blackburn seemed mighty disappointed to hear it. He leaned forward. Listen, Mrs. Fletcher, I don't know what's between you and Morgan, and it's none of my business. But there's talk in town. There's always talk, Mr. Simmons, Emma said firmly. I appreciate your concern, but Mr. Morgan has been nothing but honorable and hardworking since he came here. After Simmons left, Emma found Gideon in the north pasture, checking on their irrigation work. She told him about the foreman's visit. Blackburn won't let it go that easily, Gideon warned. He's had it in for me since Colorado. Then we'll deal with whatever comes next, Emma said simply. Together, the word hung between them, full of promise and possibility. Gideon looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Together, he agreed, the word sounding like a vow. As summer progressed, the ranch flourished under their combined efforts. The irrigation channel kept the north pasture green despite the continuing dry spell. The cattle remained healthy, and the crops promised a good harvest. Lily blossomed too, growing more confident in her riding skills under Gideon's patient tutelage, and following him around the ranch like a devoted shadow. Marshal Blackburn appeared occasionally, watching the ranch from a distance or riding by slowly when Gideon was working in the fields. It was clear he was waiting for something, some slip that would confirm his suspicions, but he made no further accusations. The tension of his surveillance was balanced by the deepening bond between Emma and Gideon. Their evening conversations on the porch became the highlight of each day, a time when they could share thoughts and memories, hopes and fears. They rarely touched, both still cautious, aware of the boundaries between employer and employee, widow and hired hand, but their growing feelings were evident in glances held too long. in the way they gravitated toward each other in any room, in the softening of Gideon's voice when he spoke her name. Lily, with a child's perception, sensed the change. One evening, as Emma tucked her into bed, she asked, "Do you like Mr. Morgan, Mama?" Emma smoothed the blanket over her daughter. "Yes, of course I do. He's been a great help to us." "No, I mean, do you like him like you liked Papa?" Lily persisted. The question caught Emma off guard. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because you smile more when he's around, and you look at him the way Mrs. Johnson looks at Mr. Johnson." Lily yawned widely. "I like him too. He knows lots of things and he never gets mad when I ask questions." Emma kissed her daughter's forehead, her heart full. "That's good to know. Now go to sleep." Later that night, unable to sleep, Emma stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the bunkhouse where a single lantern still burned. Lily's innocent observation had forced her to confront feelings she'd been carefully avoiding naming. She did care for Gideon more than she should, perhaps, for a man with his past, for a man who might still leave when the season ended or when trouble found him again. And yet, the thought of him leaving created a hollow ache in her chest. Somewhere along the way, he had become essential to her world, not just for the work he did, but for the quiet strength he offered, the unexpected gentleness he showed Lily, the way his rare smiles made her heart flutter like a girl's. Thomas had been gone nearly a year now. The sharp pain of grief had gradually softened to a gentle ache, a fond memory rather than an open wound. She would always love him, always honor what they had built together. But she was still young, still alive, with so many years ahead. Was it wrong to want companionship, to dream of a future that included Gideon Morgan? The next day brought unexpected news. A rider from town delivered a telegram for Gideon, the first communication he'd received since coming to the ranch. Emma brought it to him where he was repairing the barn roof. He climbed down the ladder, wiping sweat from his brow before taking the paper from her with a puzzled expression. "Probably nothing good," he muttered, breaking the seal. Emma watched as he read, his face revealing nothing at first, then shifting to surprise and finally something like vindication. "What is it?" she asked. "It's from the sheriff in Cheyenne," Gideon said, looking up at her. "They caught James Holden and his new partner trying to rob another bank. Holden confessed to using my name during their previous jobs." A smile slowly spread across his face. "They're clearing my name in Wyoming." Emma's heart soared. "That's wonderful news. We should tell Marshal Blackburn right away. The sheriff says he's already telegraphed all the marshals in the region." Gideon folded the paper carefully. "I'm not a wanted man anymore, Emma." The significance of that statement wasn't lost on either of them. Without the shadow of false accusations hanging over him, Gideon was free to stay or go as he chose. The question remained, what would he choose? That evening, after Lily was asleep, Emma found Gideon sitting on the porch steps, staring up at the star-filled sky. She settled beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Penny for your thoughts," she said softly. He glanced at her, his expression contemplative. "Just thinking about choices, paths taken and not taken." "And what path are you considering now? That depends." He turned toward her fully. "On what you want, Emma." Her heart quickened. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I'm not a wanted man anymore. I could stay here, keep working for you, help you build this place back up." He hesitated. "Or I could be more than your hired hand if that's something you might want." Emma's breath caught. "Gideon, I know it's too soon. I know you had a good marriage, that you loved Thomas. I'm not asking to replace him." His voice was low, earnest. "But these past months, being here with you and Lily, it's the first time in years I've felt like I belonged somewhere, like I had a purpose beyond just surviving." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "When I hired you, you said you were no good with girls. Do you still believe that?" A small smile touched his lips. "I'm learning, thanks to Lily and to you. And I told you to let me raise her gentle." Emma reached out, tentatively touching his hand. "I think we've both been learning, Gideon." He turned his hand, capturing hers. "I can't promise it will be easy. My past won't disappear overnight, no matter what that telegram says. There will be people who remember, who judge. I don't care what people think. Emma said firmly. "I care about what I know. And I know you're a good man, Gideon Morgan, a man I've come to care for deeply." His fingers tightened around hers. "I care for you too, Emma, more than I thought possible." He reached up with his free hand, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "May I kiss you?" The courtly request made her smile. "Yes," she whispered. His lips met hers gently at first, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened as Emma responded. His hand cupped her cheek, warm and strong as the kiss continued, expressing all the feelings they'd been holding back for weeks. When they finally parted, both breathless, Gideon rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for a long time." "So have I," Emma admitted, her heart racing. "But what happens now?" "Now we take it slow," Gideon said. "I'll keep working the ranch, you'll keep raising Lily, and we'll see where this leads us. No pressure, no expectations, just us finding our way together." Emma nodded, leaning against his shoulder as they both turned their gaze back to the stars. For the first time since Thomas died, she felt a sense of peace about the future, not because all problems were solved, but because she no longer faced them alone. The next few weeks brought changes, subtle but significant. Gideon continued his work on the ranch, but now there were stolen kisses in the barn, fingers intertwined during evening walks, shared smiles across the dinner table. Lily, observant as ever, noticed the shift in their relationship. "Are you going to marry Mr. Morgan, Mama?" she asked one morning as Emma brushed her hair. Emma's hands stilled momentarily. "We're just getting to know each other better right now, sweetheart. But if you did marry him, would he be my new papa?" "He would be your stepfather," Emma explained carefully. "No one can replace your papa, but it would mean Mr. Morgan would live with us and help take care of us." Lily considered this. "I think I would like that. He makes you smile and he knows how to fix everything, just like Papa did." The child's simple acceptance warmed Emma's heart. "We'll see what happens," she said, resuming the brushing. "For now, let's just enjoy having him here, all right?" As summer turned to early autumn, the harvest began. It was backbreaking work, but with Gideon's help, they brought in a bountiful crop. The proceeds from selling their excess grain and vegetables, combined with the healthy calves born that spring, put the ranch on firmer financial footing than it had been since Thomas died. In town, attitudes toward Gideon gradually shifted. The news from Wyoming had cleared his name of the most serious allegations, and his steady presence at Emma's side, his respectful demeanor, and his evident care for both Emma and Lily slowly won over all but the most determined gossips. Even Marshall Blackburn seemed to have reluctantly accepted that Gideon was not the man he had once been, though he remained coolly distant whenever their paths crossed. As the first frost approached, Gideon and Emma sat by the fireplace after Lily had gone to bed, discussing winter preparations for the ranch. The conversation eventually drifted, as it often did, to more personal matters. "Lily asked if we were going to get married," Emma said, watching Gideon's face for his reaction. He looked up from the harness he was mending, surprise evident in his expression. "Did she now, and what did you tell her?" "That we're still getting to know each other." Emma hesitated. "But I've been thinking, the bunkhouse gets awfully cold in winter." A slow smile spread across Gideon's face. "Is that an invitation, Mrs. Fletcher?" "It's a practical consideration," she replied primly, though her eyes danced with humor. "And possibly a proposal if you're interested." Gideon set aside the harness and moved to sit beside her on the sofa. "Are you sure, Emma? Marriage is a big step." "I'm sure that I love you," she said simply. "I'm sure that Lily adores you, and I'm sure that this ranch, this home, feels more complete with you in it." She took his hands in hers. "I don't need more time to know what I want, Gideon." He brought her hands to his lips, kissing them reverently. "I love you too, Emma. Have for a while now, just wasn't sure I had the right to say it." "You have every right." She leaned forward, kissing him softly. "So what do you say?" "Will you marry me, Gideon Morgan?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Though I always thought I'd be the one doing the asking." Emma laughed. "You were taking too long." They were married on a crisp October day with the aspens turning gold and the mountains dusted with early snow. It was a small ceremony in the town church, attended by a handful of friends and neighbors. Lily stood proudly at their side, beaming as she watched her mother and Gideon exchange vows. That evening, after Lily had been tucked into bed with extra stories and kisses, Emma and Gideon stood on the porch of what was now their home, his arm around her waist as they looked out at their land. "Happy, Mrs. Morgan?" he asked, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "Very happy, Mr. Morgan." She turned in his embrace, looking up at him. "And you, more than I ever thought possible," he kissed her tenderly. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Thank you for staying when it would have been easier to run." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "We're going to have a good life, Gideon." "We already do," he replied, holding her close as the evening stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. The years that followed proved them both right. The Fletcher Morgan Ranch, as it came to be known, prospered under their joint care. They worked side by side through drought and plenty, through harsh winters and gentle springs, building a life together that was richer and more fulfilling than either had imagined possible. Lily grew into a confident young woman with her mother's determination and her stepfather's quiet strength. She never forgot her birth father. Emma and Gideon made sure of that, keeping Thomas's memory alive through stories and the traditions he had started. But she loved Gideon fiercely, proudly calling him Pa from the Christmas following their wedding, a gift that had brought tears to his eyes. 2 years after their marriage, Emma gave birth to a son they named Thomas Gideon Morgan. 2 years after that, twins followed a boy and a girl, Samuel and Sarah. Their home filled with laughter and tears, challenges and triumphs, all the beautiful chaos of family life. Marshall Blackburn eventually retired, moving to California to live with his daughter. His replacement, a younger man with no history with Gideon, treated the Morgans with the same respect he showed all the established ranchers in the area. Gideon's past, while never forgotten, ceased to define him in the eyes of the community. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Emma found Gideon in the same spot where he had first dismounted on that fateful day, the entrance to what was now their thriving ranch. He was watching Lily, now 16, teaching 7-year-old Thomas how to rope a post, while the 8-year-old twins chased each other around the corral. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, slipping her arm through his. He smiled down at her, the lines around his eyes deepening. At 42, his dark hair was now streaked with silver, but his gaze was clear and content. "Just thinking about that day I rode in, looking for temporary work. I'm no good with girls, I told you." Emma laughed, leaning against him. "And I said then let me raise her gentle." "Best advice I ever took." He pulled her close, watching their children play in the golden afternoon light. "You raised all of us gentle, Emma, taught me how to love, how to put down roots, how to believe in second chances." "We raised each other," she corrected, stretching up to kiss his weathered cheek. "And we're not done yet." "Not by a long shot," he agreed, his arm secure around her waist. "We've still got stories to write, you and I." As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, casting long shadows across their land, Emma and Gideon Morgan stood together, surrounded by the life they had built from broken pieces, and brave hearts a testament to the healing power of love and the unexpected joy of finding home in each other's arms.